Yeah, let's explain that. So, my question, I think before we have the part one stuff, it's here's an issue that you, that, um, well, this is before part one, it's like your intro to the thing. So choose your issue, here's an issue that, this is right. Give me an issue. Whoever you want, because I'm going to model like the relationship, whoever you want. Yeah. Maybe say choose an issue that, that you feel passionate about, maybe. And then you could say, you can choose one from the list or or one of your own. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about it, I'm sure I've seen it on this one. And then we'll look at it. Let's do that. Just say it. It always worries me a little bit that. Yep.
You got into you're talking to you got into
No, I'm just running a Hangout, so I have.
sorry, hang on.
Yeah.
I was going to see if I could put you
Okay.
sorry, I forgot your name.
Daniela.
Daniela.
Yeah.
You are
Mamma on I'll jump on in. Yeah.
Looking about it now. Do you run
I've logged on, so I could probably do it through Google Plus. Let me just try.
Oh, let me go and Google now too.
You've got one there?
I might do it through here.
Just signing
It's nice to work up this channel. This
Yeah.
Did you get the invite?
Yeah. Run into save the video.
There you are. Yeah. So, you can fit active in the same room.
Oh, there we go.
Is it coming through?
Yeah, I can see myself.
Can you see it?
Just your like display picture.
Oh,
Oh, it's saying please wait.
oh, okay. Yep.
Oh yeah, there I see.
That's, all right. So that's working.
So it works.
One of the problems with having it through here.
I think it just takes some time, that's all. If they just persist, they should do it.
Yeah. So if a link that comes through this one,
Yeah.
you're checking for class,
Great.
but we'll have others setting up circle hangouts on each table because there's Anne, you, Rebecca, and June, and no other are going to dial in.
All right.
Okay, you can see it there. Good. Can you hear me?
Well, I don't know. Oh, turn this down. Okay.
No, that's right, you've got the loop down.
Oh, it's the loop from
That's
I need to
fine.
go over
Well,
here.
all right, I'm going to cancel that now. Nice talking to you though.
Okay, bye. This space.
If you can, that
Would it start the feedback really bad?
do Dr. Do stuff. Okay, that's good.
Okay, we're about to start in a minute on this live hangout, but you're going to have to wait for a second. There may be another hangout also starting if we're having some information about the readings in a sec. So just wait for a while. We haven't got a class going yet, but I've started this broadcast, so we're recording this and you can watch it. I've got 2 viewers, and I didn't put you in the Google viewing. You're watching it through YouTube, so I can't see you there. So I can tell you're watching, but I don't know who you are. Last week, what I did was I put the Google Plus link. This week, I've just put the YouTube link, so we don't get multiple people coming in, and eventually it'll crash because so many people might come in. But this is just running now,
This is running. So
just as a normal kind of broadcast.
Yep, yep.
You can run your Hangout, and I might even be able to well, hopefully I can turn this around. If you've got up there, I'll just
Yeah.
point it at that screen
Yeah,
and get a rough idea of what it looks like anyway.
And then we can make sure we've got these hangouts like set up, so each person will invite someone. I'll invite Linda.
Okay.
So,
We've got about 4 people tonight that are
4 or 5. Yeah.
5. Okay, so 1, 2. Yeah, we'll have 1 on each
Just
table.
not- Yeah.
Yeah. So just wait online for those people who are watching. I'm not going to turn this off. We'll just make sure it keeps going. Unfortunately, nothing's going to happen until a little bit later. I'm not starting right away. Well, I think that's what we may have to do with these,
Yeah.
is that if people come to view them, they get all this rubbish at the start, which is the same last week. And I stopped it when you said, can we have a break?
Yeah.
That was good, because then the next one was so much better, and it was just you talking, thank God.
Somebody said they watched it all.
Yeah, well, there you go. I think the second one was far better.
2 hours.
No, the second one was fine, but the first one was when we were just trying to set things up.
Yeah. Okay. Hugh, Rebecca, Anne, Linda, Kieran, June. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, so we're going to have a couple.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tables. We can do it. Some need. Need. Brad, I think, and get started. Pull a computer out.
Hey, Leah. Again.
Are there? All right. Sam. I see you're the person who watched it all live last week. No, it's I'm not very good with names.
What I'm just trying to find out is whether or not people can see the comments coming up. Probably can't. I think it doesn't work in the YouTube clip that I put in. So I've just put a comment in. If you can see the comments window, if you're viewing this, and just put in hi in the comments window on the right hand side of the screen. You might have to open comments, group chat, I think it's called. But I have a feeling you can't. So I will check in the 21st century area.
Do you see what Rebecca's writing?
No. So she's in the chat, is she?
Yeah, she's in the video form.
So she's actually she's writing into here, into the 21C, or she's writing in the sorry.
In the other thing.
Okay, great.
Rebecca got that. Oh, Melvin. So then Mona.
Hello, Christine. I did.
Just getting people to check into the chat in the 21C Ning, just if you are watching this online. So I can see there's 2 viewers online. If you just say that you're doing that, I'll have a check, see who you are. Thanks, Anne. We're going to start in a minute. Hopefully we'll be able to get you to join a table in a minute, but this is just going to be recording. Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for doing that. So we've got Anne and Rebecca and Kieran. Okay, great. Hopefully you know that there's a video hangout, a live hangout running, which you can watch me at the moment. I'm just the only person in that, but there may be an introduction that comes in a minute from Nick, and if I think it's Belinda. I'm not sure about this. I think Belinda may come online and she might introduce one of the readings or both the readings. If that doesn't happen, we'll just get you to connect or invite you to a table later. So the link for the Hangout is up on the homepage forum, although I could probably put it in here, Anne, so if you just wait for a second, I'll put it in here. I will. Just going to get it.
Yeah. I agree. We could have just
Hopefully I can get this one.
So let's put it really here.
So just go back. Sorry guys, we're just.
But they're all good. Yeah, you get like swaps. You get over.
If I can find it. So we haven't started yet, so I'm just putting this in for those people so they can try and have a look at the Hangout. This is
Maybe tomorrow.
probably just can see me at the moment. Not sure whether we've got Belinda online yet. Is Belinda coming in here yet? If you can you go in the chat in 21C, Belinda?
Yeah, we can't, no, you got to fit it in. A lot of these people are coming. Others don't. Hey, good, how are you? What instructions have you given them there?
I'm just telling people to text into the chat in 21C because this doesn't, they can't do the chat in here.
Yep.
So they're just texting in there.
Good.
And I've only got 2 people, 3 viewers now,
Right.
but some of them are actually seeing where to go
Good.
in the chat. Hi everyone. We're just setting up, so I'll turn this around in a minute and we'll see Nick talking to you, I hope. Hold on. It's a little bit small. What we're going to do in a minute is introduce the discussion just from this video hangout, but then you may have to close this video hangout because we might invite you to an individual table, which will be a different hangout. It won't be the same. You might get a phone call or a ring on your Google Plus account, and you should probably close this one and then go to the other one. So this is running as a YouTube hangout rather than a Google hangout, if you like. So YouTube hangout's just broadcasting in a bit of a delay. In a second we'll get a bit of an introduction here, so don't turn this off yet, and then we'll tell you that you might have to turn it off while we invite you to a table to talk to the rest of the individuals on a small table. So it'll just be a discussion that you'll appear as a laptop screen, I suppose, to everybody else.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, I'm just mucking around with the lead at the moment. Yeah, just have to put up with this. I'm just going to go back to the 21C to have a look, see what's happening in there. Hi June, I hope you can hear this. Hi Anne, hi Rebecca, and I think that's everyone. I'm not sure whether June's coming in too. Hopefully you can see this, June. Oh no, we've got Rebecca, Anne and Kiernan. Kieran? Hopefully Kieran can find us, and we're just starting in a sec. But we're going to have to introduce this first from this hangout, and then we'll go to an individual group hangout for each of you at a different table for each of you, probably.
Yeah. So I've used Ricky's and twice as another Yeah. So I've got to be, use them on and off.
All right.
Always want to use more, but it's just, I always try to tap into something. Like I had one that was more general, like the class, it was more general stuff. But then other ones I try and make it up. So I try and make it more specific to something we're actually doing. So whether it's specific to a unit of work or just a term or different groups and stuff. So I think because otherwise they can just don't have them. Yeah, so that's the thing, you can kind of do either or. And depends on the two, then on the kids what their experience. You get some kids who are really into it, and they'll put something up there, and they have to then this comment that way. So that way you make sure it's actually copy on them and doing it. And then our school portal has a blogging component in it. So then I start use that more, so I stop using other just doing as much. And then format now. So I'm just signing up this new portal called LMS Spec, and that has that same here. They're going to eventually have a system that actually has a unit and white. Yeah, no. I thought more about it, then I need to talk to people at school about what would be. I think I'll be running. So thinking like what you suggested about the professional and staff teachers. So I think for me that's probably going to be the better option than the student involvement at the moment, based on the fact of where the school's going with this system they're trying to put in place. But I'm waiting because next week they're going to tell us what the next lot of those professional classes are going to be, so what the professional action committee is going to be. But once I know that, then I can probably whether I need to talk to the curriculum coordinator whether I say could it be that what year is for all of those to work together or to be able to put things up and share, which kind of goes more with what my issue was last semester. Wasn't of sharing across, but then a lot of stuff.
Sure, I think we might be waiting for Belinda, so I'm just going to let this run for a little while. So sorry about this taking a bit of time. Just be patient. We've only got 3 of you in at the moment. I might just make sure that the others know where this is. Hopefully I've got the link right. Just let me check. And okay, so
Okay, I'm going to start a hangout. Don't join us. I'm going to join only with the people online. Then we'll get some instructions happening, and then I'm going to ask each table to create a hangout and invite one of those people. So I'll start it, but don't join it until I tell you to, or ask you to. Okay, let's see. Yeah, that's
I don't know. I think it's really
sorry. Take out, got people. Okay, you can see the hangout happening on the screen. This will be the initial, the beginning. Can you hear me online? Good. And again, first genetic 5 levels. Is that right? I promise I'll very Okay. Can somebody on we're getting sound from this too. Can somebody on the link say something, please? Can someone speak?
On the hangout.
Yeah.
Hi, Ted. Hi, Nick.
Hi everyone, you're on the big screen, the whole class can see you.
Oh, I'm not cool with that. I'm saying that.
Okay. Good. Who else is there? Kieran's there, and JC, Rebecca and me. So Anne hasn't found us yet. Oh, you're back again. So, all right, well, look, we might start, and what we're going to do today is that, now why don't I take it over this, because that's, you know, what we are going to do today is look first at the readings, possibly first. I will talk a little bit more about assessment. There's been some fabulous posting going on in the Ning. The Ning is alive. You can see, if you haven't visited it in the last week, you'll see that it's changed. People are changing it themselves, changing the profile pictures. We seem to have Iron Man now. And Elmo got deleted. So please, it's really important that everyone engages with this Ning during the week. We've got some sensational comments going about the readings from last week and the readings for this week. Actually, Jacob's stuff kind of fitted really well with both last week's reading, but also some of this week's stuff that I want to talk about. If you've had a chance, if you've been looking, are you getting your updates from the Ning? And your email, you said, look, it's really nice if you say, let me know when people send things, because then you can see what's happening. Put C21 learning or something as your own folder. Someone's making a noise. Who's getting? Oh, Belinda, you're there, right? There's a bit of back. What's going on in there?
Ask them to mute their mics if they can, if they know how to do that.
Yeah, beauty, that's great. All right. So, excellent. I'm going to go around and just say hi to each person on the link. If they could just say, unmute their mic and say hi, and we'll have the routine established. Okay, Rebecca.
Hi.
Works beautifully. Kieran.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Kieran. Belinda.
There you go, pen button.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Good. Excellent. Now you're going to be presenting this afternoon, Belinda.
Well, I'll put the information up in the link
Yeah.
about that. So when you want me to be able to talk about it, let me know.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to now say hi to Anne. Oh. Hello.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi.
Good. All right. You can all mute up now. So, when we finish the introductions, we will leave Belinda live on this hangout, and I'm going to ask a few people to start a hangout. One will invite Anne, one will invite Rebecca, one will invite Kieran, and that's it. Because you've only got 4 people, 1, 2, 3, 4 there. So we'll have those 4 people sitting virtually on each table, as it were. Then we can engage in the discussions around the readings and interact with them, hopefully as if they were in the room. All right, are we all happy with that? Good. You can just yell out any time, those people who are online. I'm going to return to the assessment details. Now, I have added 2 links, 2 essays from a couple of years ago that will be useful. They are very, very different essays. Both of them were turned in with some adaptation to published articles in the ICTEB professional journal. So, one of them, I don't think even got an H. One I can't remember. The other certainly did. But they were both really good articles, essays, in 1,500 words. One uses only one reference, which was probably not enough for me, and for an article of this, but it was heavily based in teacher professional practice. So the story it told was rich enough that it addressed the issue. One reference is possibly, it was good enough to get a good mark, but we would expect more than one reference from an article like this. The second one has a huge reference list. And I've used it there, 1, because it's a really well-written piece, 2, because it shows that you can actually use many references in a short piece and still have a sense of continuity and readability in an article. We don't expect you to use that many references. As I said in the NING, this student was in the process of getting himself ready for a DEd, so this was his coursework component. He was preparing to write a thesis for a doctorate, so his approach was very much focused to getting himself into that academic process of doctoral study. And I don't know how many, I know one person is doing a career, but for me the emphasis here is slightly different. It's not so much about your ability to identify 35 references and use them in a 1,500 word essay. I mean, that's useful, it's a great skill, but the notion here is that you can use your readings appropriately and that you can use appropriate readings and then use them to support what you're talking about, the ideas you're investigating in your essay. So you've got two extremes, two very, very different approaches, but both essays that scored well and are good examples of the kinds of writing that you can do. And I'm sorry that, you know, I just can't bring myself to write a rubric for this. I'm not very good at writing rubrics. I think it requires significant study, don't you?
Well, yes.
It's very specialised educational practice and something that I haven't studied. Two, I don't think you need one in this when you're doing a master's level course. I think you can work it out in many ways for yourself using the examples, reading around, thinking, am I doing the kinds of things that Nick's talked about? Am I using literature appropriately? Am I using the appropriate literature? Do I engage with that literature and demonstrate that you understand it? And then, of course, are you actually telling the story of your topic? So, haven't received any emails yet. Have you received any, Ted?
No.
No. About what topic you want to write about. So, if you have thought about it, you need to send me an email or send Ted an email saying, I'm thinking about looking at the use of Hangouts in tertiary education, or maybe not. Something like that. So, and if your school has adopted something, if your workplace is using something, that provides you an opportunity to investigate what's going on in that setting, and maybe write around it so that you can use your professional experience and your professional voice as well as your readings. Those of you who studied with me before know that I have a very strong opinion about the value of your professional knowledge. The difference between, in my opinion, and in my professional experience, I have seen, I think you can call upon that in the writing of your work. You don't have to, but don't be afraid of including your own experience or the things that you've witnessed. I mean, it's not all about me, but it is about you being able to articulate your experiences and to make meaning from them and to be informed by literature. That literature can, of course, include things like blogs and tweets, but you have to acknowledge that those are the sources, that they are kind of academic. So, more on that later. Belinda is probably desperately writing. She's permanently smiling, or is that just her picture? It's just a picture. So, I'm going to... Belinda, have we got activities, or you just got to go through what you put up there?
Well, I wasn't exactly sure what you wanted me to be able to do, with being the first one, and my camera's not working at the moment, so I don't know. I'll keep playing with it to see if I can get that up. But basically, after reading the two readings, there are very different views in both of them. Like the wiki is a very static way of being able to engage the kids, and the kids didn't really take that on board. They didn't see the wiki as being able to have the opportunity to integrate with each other and be able to work together, where the other one where they were looking at the area in Fitzroy was trying to be able to have a community that was already there, that was a disengaged community, be able to try and engage the community. So there were very different views of being able to look at it two different ways. So it's interesting to compare and contrast the two ways in which they look to be able to try and build a community in practice and be able to see what were the advantages and disadvantages of each and how you could improve on that. So basically, sort of like a PMI of being able to look at the two approaches to that.
There's a whole class sitting here. Has anybody got you hope you're all listening.
So is my mic working okay?
Yeah, perfectly.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody out there? No comments on what the leader said? Anybody from online space? Boy, this is going to be hard work tonight, I can tell you now. Okay. Let's
Well, I think it was really interesting being able to actually read the one about the wiki and be able to see that the students in that class were very much what is mine, and you can't change what I've done because the work that I have done is what's going to be graded and that's what's going to be assessed. So if you change it, you're changing my mark. And if you're trying to build a community of practice where the students are learning from each other, this is something that we want to move away from what my knowledge is mine and what I share is my work and be able to try and build a community is talking to one another and being able to help one another. And it's really interesting to think about, well, how do we do that? How do we then be able to build into students that it's not about what they do and their grade, it's about what they can share with others and how they can all build together to be able to support one another in being able to continue to learn, especially with the new inquiry which is coming in subjects in year 7 to 10.
Okay. Now, has anybody got a comment?
I feel like things have come a long way in the 9 years since articles. I'm going to come over here and get you to repeat.
Well, basically, because we've got to make sure the Ning hears the hangout. So big loud voice.
The article was written 9 years ago. And I think at the time it was probably somewhat cutting edge technology. But in the time since, I think teachers are probably a little better at framing assessment tasks to include group contributions and encouraging more collaboration in that sort of sphere.
That's
We're probably going to need two of these microphones.
Yeah, they're great.
that's really interesting because when we get to some activities that I have planned, one of those things is discussed. There are reasons that we use those two articles, and there's stuff in there that you say is absolutely right. The age of the article, both articles actually dates them, and I want to talk about that in a little while. But I'd like some feedback from somebody either online or in the room. We've had one, that's great. Everyone's read the stuff. The wikis in schools. Who's done a wiki in school?
Well, I've done one. I've tried to be able to do one in year 12 class. Is that working okay?
Yeah, there's some music going on in the background.
Yeah, sorry, we're out for a laboratory dinner with my son.
Oh, right.
Yes, sorry, there's a little bit of music going on here, but yeah, I tried to be able to build a year 12 class and being able to have each of the students in the class be able to participate by being able to do a particular area, but the students then were able to read that and go, well, I could have this, but it's not about this. And the students were very nervous to be able to share. It was like my notes are my notes, and I don't want to share those just in case I'm wrong. And able to then rely on those notes because of mistakes that could be there. And I tried to reassure them, going, well, we're all investing in, we're all supporting one another to be able to do it. It just didn't quite connect with the way that I wanted it to be able to. So
Okay, I'm going to.
it's something I'll continue to work on.
Good. I'm going to stop you for a moment because
No worries.
who was it over on that table? Somebody's done something.
I just really, I've just used the tracking to the kids in my practice activity. I don't normally use it, but it's I don't know if that
No. Look,
being able to edit different things is really necessary.
look, absolutely. For those online, that you probably did, but that discussion was about using a wiki at uni. Now, Ted and I have used wikis at uni, and using them through Blackboard, which has a default of not letting people contribute. Kind of tells you about technology. What I'm going to get us to talk about soon when we break up is really the appropriateness of the whole approach of this page. The whole notion of running the wiki there. Why? Why were they doing it? What were they trying to achieve? Could they possibly have actually achieved what they were saying they were trying to achieve? And are there other ways of doing it? So I'm going to just leave that there for the moment. And I want to go on to the social capital one. What is it? Hopkins, Thomas, Meredith and Ewing. So you were into that one too, Belinda, weren't you?
Sorry, just turning on my microphone. Yeah, I read through that one. That was an interesting article. The way that she tried to be able to take a community that was already there and then go, if I give them ICT and I provide them with the knowledge of how to be able to use ICT, then I'm going to build a stronger community with that. And it was interesting the way that she went, well, this is the way that you're going to be able to overcome some of those barriers that are there in regards to language and culture by being able to just implement ICT. And the way that I interpreted it is just, she thought that ICT was just going to be the answer. And I don't know how successful it was. I don't think it was as successful as what she wanted to. And she went through and went, well, where there was already communities, it was more successful because they were more fully engaged in being part of the community rather than being able to have people like those that were disabled and already engaged with the community and then going, well, I'll give you ICT so you can build a community. But they didn't know how to be able to do that. And there needs to be more scaffolding of being able to try and build that community rather than just being able to go, here's ICT, here's a wiki, or here's a blog, or here's something to be able to communicate with everybody. Let's just communicate that way.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Belinda. What I'm going to do now, because we're not getting a lot of power back from the room. I'm not feeling the energy in the room. You've got to work with me. The energy, we need the energy. So, what I'm going to do is post some questions onto the, probably just into the chat. There's probably still places any. And I'm going to ask you to work in groups. I'm going to get some of you to drop off listening, probably all of you to drop off listening, and I'm going to get some names off this hangout, and I'm going to get some other hangouts going that invite you, because we'll have some actual class activities that address some of the questions. Now, before I do that, last week Ted made a very good point about the readings and the idea of how you encourage discussion by asking a question. So let's think. Thank you, Belinda, for your very detailed and with detailed notes and your sort of your detailed feedback then. It's very helpful. When the rest of the class breaks up, we might have some more feedback for you. When you are looking at leading readings, I think it's a nice idea to pose key questions for yourself and for the group. Sam, isn't it? Sam's question about the relevance and the age of the wikis in schools article is the kind of question that I would like to see being raised and discussed. And it's one of the questions that I've posed myself. And the questions that I would like you to look at, and I'll just type these into the chat, and you can start thinking about them, are questions, if we look at the wiki paper, why is it necessary? Why do it? You know, what was the point of doing an activity like that, educationally? So that's the first question, and I think we can then look at that again and say, you know, what are the real potential benefits of using wikis? And then maybe in that way. That's the second question, okay? What are those benefits? Why? What are we trying to achieve and what can we achieve? And then, of course, what other more appropriate, I can't spell, appropriate tools might we use? Or might they have used? You know, they were saying, well, we were looking for knowledge communities, the building of knowledge communities. Well, were they going to find a knowledge community by setting up a wiki? You know, those are the questions. So I've got 1, 2, 3 questions there, and I'd like you to I'm just going to add one more. No, I won't. That's from the next one. I want you to create. Oh, what have I done? I want you to create some answers to those questions. And I want you to do that in your groups, and I want you to include one individual from online. So, online people, I'm going to get you to drop out of this Hangout. I'm probably going to close it, and then you will get an invite. Does everybody on the table, does anybody know how to create a Hangout?
You can actually connect to all these people first.
Yes, but I can let you do it. You can do that very easily because all of their details are on the home page. Somebody's returned the home page back to its original pristine condition. So you can see who's online because they put it on the schedule on the. If you put their name in there, they should pop straight up. If not, all of their email addresses are in here. Okay, we've only got 4 people, possibly 5. And if you're still having trouble, I can show you. Whoops. My circles. These are the people, and I can give you their their addresses. All you need to do. Now, who's going to do it?
Just one from each table needs to do it.
One from each table.
Needs to do one person.
Yep, one from each table needs to start a Hangout. You go to Google Plus. You go to
Yeah, you can use that, or use this one. I haven't actually.
One from each table. Hands
Actually,
up
I've
before
logged
you.
onto this, so
Yeah?
yeah.
Is that one?
One,
That's actually no. Don't use that one. Use this one.
That one?
Leave
Two.
it logged onto me.
Yeah.
It's just
3. Any others?
Oh, okay.
do people know who they're going to invite?
I'm going to tell them.
Okay, great.
Who's talking to me? Okay. So, we need Rebecca. Who's going to do Rebecca? Be brave.
We'll bring
Why is it
Rebecca.
great music?
We'll bring
So
Rebecca.
Rebecca's over at that table. And you can go, you're going to be invited to join Emily. All right? You with me, Anne? Okay, so you can leave this one now. Bye.
We will search 10 for Rebecca.
Kieran, who's going to look
Yeah,
after
just
Kieran?
in the 21C,
Yeah.
see if you can either search for
You can
Rebecca
do
or go
this,
to
it's
members
okay.
and just
Yes.
yeah, Rebecca Anderson.
I can give you the email addresses. What do you want?
See that?
Okay. Who? Yes? I don't know. We only need one table to do it. So use that computer there.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, let's be honest, we just
We've
need
still
one
got two
computer to
people
do
not
it
on
rather than everyone doing it, because we just get it
Kieran,
twice. So
Kieran,
let's
you're
just do it
going
on
with-
one.
Sorry, what's
Do it on
the
this
name?
one if you can find Rebecca.
You're right, Kieran?
Oh, what's the last name?
Kieran,
Shall we do this?
C-O-N-D-O-N.
Yeah, we'll use that one then. We'll leave this one.
Okay,
Got
fine.
him?
That'll pick up.
Now, if you invite her to a video hangout, then
Okay, Kieran.
she'll hopefully
you with me?
answer, and we'll eventually see her
Yeah.
appear on your
Yeah, you can
computer.
drop out of this, you're going to get
And then you're going
invited.
to hopefully turn your computer around, and we'll actually,
And
sorry,
I
yeah,
need
pull that
someone to
down.
take Belinda. Who's taking Belinda?
She has to answer you.
Yeah, which one?
Great, now,
Who's connected?
she won't be on
Ready
this.
to
This
go?
is
Okay, we'll put Belinda over there.
broadcast. Unfortunately,
Belinda,
you
you can drop out. Who's
guys
going to?
where I'm actually just recording the
Okay.
discussion.
And I'll let you know
And,
if I need.
This is actually beaming out to just through YouTube, and people who want to can connect, or later on, we might just leave this go. If it really ends up being no use, I'll just delete it. But it's not. So don't swear too much, but it's not really a problem. You won't swear. But the main thing is that we're going to sit around the table and pretend this Rebecca is on this laptop, so you might even face it away from you and maybe just move across slightly so she can see you once the...
She's connecting.
She's, yeah, you'll have to wait for her to answer the phone. If she's hung up Nick, she'll need to hear the hangout call.
Do you want me to tell her?
Yeah, tell her in chat that we're trying to connect to her and that she might have to accept that call.
Can't hear you, Judy. Okay, you can hear me obviously, Judy. Wave if you can hear me. Good. I can't hear you. Can you speak, please? Still can't
But I
hear
have
you.
through, so when you're connecting, you've got your Gmail account, and then when you start to Gmail, it'll then ask you to,
So this group
when you
here,
want to start to
you've got June
plus
Frost.
the same time, usually Gmail, and then it'll
June Frost.
Is this the best way?
Oh, so you create a separate Gmail account. I know. Just go into Gmail, just Google and sign up, that way, and then when you sign up, it'll automatically ask you to connect Google Plus straight away then. It's an option within it. I've created now a second. I had a Gmail account. Got it.
Now,
I had actually.
June is an RMIT address. So, Judy's
Chat
gone.
advice,
I know
and
Judy's
online
still
and
there.
chat with Rebecca. We're trying to connect to hang out.
What's not available?
Oh.
How are we going?
We're trying to connect.
Today?
We're just trying to connect to Rebecca, but she's not answering.
No, this is how it's all meant to work.
There's the answer on mine.
Sorry?
There's the answer on mine.
Get him. I'll go back in. You go, Sam.
So where was the edit out? No, she's not answering on chat either.
How do you even add her? Because I'm trying to.
Is she coming up at all? Nothing. Like,
She may not be in chat. I think she didn't actually appear in my chat, so she may not have 21. See open. So I'll see if she's got a Google account. She probably should.
She does, but she's not on it either.
Oh, so she's not there. So she disconnected and disappeared. Good on her.
she's like, she contributed to this one.
Okay,
Good start.
Kieran's put his, we've got Sam there. So, have we connected yet?
Still got no
Right.
Rebecca.
Rebecca disappeared. We think she might have hung up, gone home.
Was she the one out at dinner? Or was that no? That was Belinda. She got freaked out. She was trying to call her. Scary.
Okay.
Let's just
Start?
talk,
Yeah.
about, and if we get Rebecca eventually, I'll see if I can get her, but I think we should get started on the questions, or just to clear the air, what anyone wants to say about either of the readings. Let's start with the first one, I think. I shouldn't lead it, by the way. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut, but there are some questions that Nick's got in the chat to direct us. I might actually talk about what I think about it in a minute.
So why is it
Unnecessary. Well, I think it's actually what I felt from the readings was that, and as it kind of came out from the case study, that I don't think the students really were clear, maybe whether the teachers were really clear on the direction of where they were headed. I think one of the things I picked up on the Ning was even saying how that purpose needs to be really clear, because it's like anything in education, but particularly when you're using technology, you could just add something for the sake of adding it or using it, but if it's not really there with a clear purpose, then it's probably a lot of hassle to sometimes go through. Like setting up a wiki is not always that easy, and students have to be aware. And as Rebecca even said, I think it was Rebecca was saying before even that her or Belinda was saying that even with senior students, they're really hesitant to maybe comment on each other's posts. My experience is younger kids probably don't have that same concern. They're a little bit freer at wanting to sort of get that across. They're probably not so mindful of it. I teach Year 5, and I've also taught Year 4 and used similar sort of things with them as well. And certainly the experience, what I've heard, is people even with Year 2 and Year 1 students using them. So I think maybe if you start out when they're younger, and probably kids in secondary school, it might be their first time and even trying something like a wiki. They might not have used it a lot in previous years, so maybe for them it is more of a daunting aspect and not something they're not as comfortable with. But I think maybe what you find now, primary kids are probably a bit more familiar with them. Maybe then how it could be used can be a little bit more efficient and a little bit more beneficial. But it does still depend from school to school.
I think something that they were saying in the article was that the students were taking the set of rules that they'd learnt about classwork and applying that to the wiki.
Yeah.
And so I think secondary school students have just had more time to internalise this set of rules about behaviour. So they've got this set of rules, which is, no, you don't mess with other people's work.
Yeah.
Which perhaps primary kids have not yet developed that. Like for them, it's still, oh, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's out. There's probably that more, maybe more group work as well too. So more that general ownership.
And I think when you get into particularly year 12, there is this huge emphasis that we place on individual performance because that's how you're assessed at your VCU level. And so the kids are taking that and then seeing it as a different context. And I think you raise the point of you need to explicitly tell them.
Yeah.
This is not like what we've done before.
It's completely different. Yeah.
And I was going to say that I haven't actually run a wiki, but when I was at university, I had a subject lecturer who did. And it was a similar thing to this, that there was a contribution grade that you had to put stuff on the wiki. But part of that grade was actually you had to edit other people's work.
Yeah.
So you had to build 2 and then edit 5 or something.
Yeah.
So like they could have done something like that with the kids, I think. Say, I must actually see
that there.
Even if it is just a spell check or changing the photos, but just making it sort of normalised. This is what we have to do.
Yeah, it's even like Nick was saying too, how he's saying he doesn't have a rubrics for the assignments, but even part of, like I know, using iPads even at school, the rubrics that as a teacher you have to develop for assessment are completely different to what you would have had as a rubric for assessment of just a written task a student might have done, because therefore the purpose and goal behind it is completely different. So then when you are assessing students, you have to make that really clear. So, for example, inquiry, the kids are using iPads and using all sorts of different applications, but you've got to make the rubrics then kind of general enough that they still touch on that fact of students sort of having that ownership or using them more creatively or whatever it might be. I think you've kind of got to really address that as a teacher, and for some teachers that's quite new, and some probably don't always feel as comfortable doing that. So, I think that, as you say, that explicit teaching of how to engage in a wiki or a blog has to be taught, and I think it's for some it's not something they're just familiar with, maybe.
Has anyone else done any work with wikis in any other setting, like at school or at uni yourself?
I have done it at school with my classes before, like with Year 5s. So,
but you've got younger kids.
Yeah, younger kids. So I don't know about secondary.
Less
inhibited. So I don't know when it comes to secondary.
I just want to try this idea. I'm not saying this is right, but I just quite like the articles. The only thing it sort of really found out was that it said that the students at the secondary level were establishing the rules of their community by referring back to rules that they were aware of in another kind of setting, that is their standard
face-to-face
rules. So the notions of, what we were talking about last week, communities of practice, which I don't necessarily agree with, but it sort of proves that that does work. It's sort of automatically the students tried to establish it was okay to comment on other students' graphics, but you couldn't delete their text because within the student community they were used to, like you were saying, people get used to some way, and then you bring in this new thing, you've got to really explain or give them marks for actually in your, was it postgrad studies or?
No, it was undergraduate. It was microbiology 101.
And how did that go when they gave you marks for it?
I really liked it. I got really involved and I edited a lot.
Did other people do the same? Or?
I don't know. I was actually thinking about it, and I think I need to get in contact with some of the people that I went through that course with and ask them what their opinions of it was. Because, I thought it was good. I certainly liked it.
Did you have any reticence about deleting someone's text?
Probably I still did. I think I might have been more of, I would edit by adding things more than by taking things out. So I'd go in and I'd say, even if I just leave it as a comment of, I'm not sure about this, can we get some clarification about this point? I thought that it was this molecule acting in this way rather than what you seem to be suggesting here.
Yeah.
And it was also, it's very factual stuff. There is a right and a wrong. So.
Yeah.
can sort of give a clear-cut answer there, but I think I probably would have tended towards adding rather than taking off.
Yeah, and I just want to stay with you because I think it's kind of interesting how it works. It does work. I wouldn't write off wikis. That's my personal feeling. Is that wikis are an amazing kind of development that we should try and think of. Maybe it's a matter of giving marks to certain things or just giving some proper instruction about this is different or whatever. But the notion of where the lecturer, your actual course, sort of directed you, were you all working towards a particular kind of problem outcome, or what? Why did they have a wiki today?
The way it was set up was that was our textbook. We didn't have a textbook set for the course. We had the wiki, and he had set up the pages as being the chapters of the textbook, and we had to write the textbook basically as we went. So as he did a lecture, he then said, okay, you three people, you're writing up this lecture as this chapter of the textbook, and so then we would go away and we would use the lecture notes and use a little bit of extra information and research to write that and put some graphics in, and that would then be the resource for the whole class. Some other three people would do the next lecture. So we developed, I guess, that shared set of resources.
Great ownership.
And it was part of it. We had to also go and check other people's work.
So I don't think that's a bad idea, actually. That's not a bad way of coming up with
Good ownership
That
of
means
it.
how much you want to learn.
Yeah.
It sets the really few.
I guess you do sort of end up with that thing of there were some people who were a lot more committed to it than others. So for instance, I was probably one of those over-keen people who went and put in as much as I could and went through and then put in lots of other people. And so then other people are in a situation where they could just sort of put in a few sentences for their section, yep, tick it off, I've done it. And they don't have to do it to a very high standard because someone else is going to come along behind and clean it up. So I guess you have that.
Where's the need there?
no, we couldn't get
Rebecca's
Rebecca to
disappeared.
come through. She might have disappeared. I don't know what she did, but she wasn't available.
Okay, I'll send her a chat.
Yeah.
Okay, good idea.
Okay.
So, if you were thinking about, I mean, I'm really kind of interested in whether or not we can use a wiki environment. What kinds of things do you think might be important, just more broadly, not just saying a textbook? Like a textbook's a great idea, actually, getting a group of students to come and redesign something that they may need as a resource or may want to use. So is there other sort of resources that we could perhaps use, or maybe in your own kind of teaching to be I reckon you need a project for a wiki. It's got to have
Gotta be something specific, I think.
Yeah.
I think, and that's where my this sort of experience in wikis and also sort of blogs has been. I've tried sort of them more in a general sense, like just our general our Year 5 blog, say, but then I've also had wikis or blogs that have had sort of a specific focus where it's only been on a unit of work, or I've had sort of one group using one at one time. So I think and when it's probably more targeted, I think the outcome's probably richer because it doesn't just become general comments or just people putting stuff up. It actually becomes something where that conversation is there more. But it has to, I think still being quite explicit. And I think as a teacher, you've got to then make reference to it. So whether it's when you're back at school, and if it becomes more of a homework task, then I think at school you've actually got to actually bring it up and, have it in front of the whole class or talk about certain things so that there's still that sort of active engagement of it still within that face-to-face classroom as well as in that virtual sense, so that students maybe see that it is something of importance, that they don't just kind of comment once and then not comment again. It has to be maybe made reference to in the classroom, if possible.
So I'm going to try and do the questions. We're sort of doing why it's necessary, but maybe we should try and work on, what are the real potential benefits of using wikis? Can we think of anything that we haven't mentioned yet that would, just add to things that we've thought about in terms of what would be a benefit of a wiki?
I think that there's a place that you can go and go over what's been said and done. Like here now we're talking about all those things are lost, whereas wiki you can go back to it, you can refer to it, you can use that, when you need to do your project or whatever, to use that information to fall back on.
I think just in the reading or something else I've heard, but that term of it being like a it is something ongoing, but then it's an artifact at the end. So that's that resource. I like that term of being sort of an artifact, and that's something that you can return back to if you want to. So say like that textbook. It's something that if it could then be, it's there, then you're not just using it throughout the semester, but even for someone in the future, they could even refer students for the next subject next year, say, to look back on that textbook that you guys created, say, as an example or for a different purpose, I suppose.
I think we should take note. So one, it's possibly quite good for getting a resource together. So we've got that example of either a textbook or something where people have worked together on something that they can take away.
Mm-hmm.
Two, your idea of not losing that discussion. The discussion is in the wiki, and unlike a verbal discussion which might disappear or get lost,
so stored
there, you can store it and go back to it. I'm trying to think of other potentials. Can you think of anything that might be a kind of...
I think the engagement can be quite high often for some, particularly for some students that, and I know a lot of sort of research out there says that even too, if you've got students who maybe are hesitant to contribute in a face-to-face environment, for some students having that sort of online environment can be more comfortable for them, so they don't feel that maybe if they're more shy to contribute in a classroom situation, they might actually feel more comfortable online.
Yep.
Whether it then allows them that time to sort of stop and think before they will post.
Yeah.
Which I kind of taps into a TED talk that I think was Anna put up, and I was watching that TED talk too, and it was interesting in that sense that through sort of online things, it's that real, for some it's more comfortable because they actually can think before they post rather than an instant kind of sharing, I suppose. So maybe that engagement can be higher.
Does anybody else find that personally with online environments, that it's a bit easier because you can think?
Yeah, I think sometimes. Depends on the topic.
True.
Yeah.
There's a funny thing that happens with me. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, and I don't think everybody else feels the same, is that sometimes I think it's too permanent, and I kind of worry that I'm leaving things...
What's that digital footprint, I suppose, aspect?
I don't like emailing parents. I always feel really stressed about that because it's like...
It's evidence.
Yeah,
it's that real evidence
this
there.
This been put in writing, whatever I've said, I'm going to be held accountable to it.
Yeah. My school actually says, if anything, if parents send you this long email, so you actually just say, thank you for your email, and it's a brief response because then you actually say it's better than to often take the time before you actually call them back.
In some ways, I do like the fact that you can take the time to respond. I don't like suddenly phone and I'm trying to do something else either. But I do get stressed about hitting send on that email. What if I've used the wrong word here?
Yeah, the tone. It's always that tone, and I think too, it's that you don't know what the tone is like and whether what you might interpret something as someone else mightn't, I suppose.
We might be a bit more aware as teachers, perhaps, than... I mean, I think generally people who are reticent to talk or pipe up in a classroom sometimes feel a bit more comfortable just texting because they get more time to think about it, whereas I am a bit the reverse. I don't care what I say, but if I actually have written it down, I know it might be sometimes taken the wrong way, and a bit more careful when I start to put things in writing. But I think that's the teacher thing coming out. But it may be that that's a positive for kids, and high school kids, they're really used to texting, and it seems to be kind of liberatory for them. They don't have a problem. They've got their own mechanisms for abbreviating things, and it might actually be quite a good way of getting some discussion started. As long as they're aware that, I mean, it is different, and they can make a contribution just by writing something down, adding something to a wiki. I'm just trying to think through.
I think feedback as well is one. It's can obviously be. I think if a teacher or a student is commenting on someone's post or something they've put up, that feedback can be obviously instant, and it can be quite relevant to a student as well. So the feedback can be quite specific, rather than just sort of, say if a student presents, say, a project in front of the class, you can actually give them that feedback throughout the learning experience. So it doesn't have to be at the end or when you get a chance to touch base. As a teacher too, you can kind of keep track of what's happening.
Okay.
So you can sort of then feedback along the way, which, I guess a lot out there says that kids need that feedback a lot more. So sort of a way of going around that sort of area of need.
Do you mean like teacher feedback? Or do you mean...
Either student or student, I think.
Yeah.
Because it can be more specific, I think. You can actually make it specific about what their post was, whether it's elements within that, or you can make it general still if you wanted to as well, I suppose is the option. Depending.
When you were doing the university course, did they ask you to feedback on other people's ideas?
We had to edit other pages.
Edit other pages, so it's like a feedback thing. Yeah. I think you have to kind of give that to the students a bit.
Yeah.
And the other reason for doing that is if you're a really lazy teacher like me, it actually helps to get the students to do their feedback to each other. So you can do a little bit, but you can't do everyone in a big class. You're just never going to do it. So it's better. I'm just trying to think of potential benefits. If the students are connected and you give them the task to feedback ideas to each other, then and they're going to get recognised for that as well. And you might even comment on their comments or whatever. You don't have to do it. That you don't want to give yourself more work, you want to give yourself less work so that they're actually feeding back to each other. I'm trying to...
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to stop the discussions now that we've got everybody present. Wouldn't it be so much easier for everybody to turn up to class? Yes, but then maybe we wouldn't have a subject. Okay, so I think I didn't need to talk this long on wikis because I really want to talk about social capital. But we didn't get onto social capital because I didn't pose any questions. I'll be posing those questions very soon. But in terms of specific group feedback, I wonder if anybody has come up with anything like, not necessarily a list, but possible alternative apps and reasons for actually allowing members of the community, if that's what you had, to actually edit each other's work. Because that's the point of a wiki, isn't it? A wiki isn't about, it's more than sharing, it's about actually opening yourself up to having your work edited. So, any scintillating and revealing feedback that might have come from any of the groups that we can share as a whole.
Do our list.
You had a list.
You typed a list.
Were you typing?
A list.
Right.
Right. Let's see if you typed it, you could put it on the Ning.
I'm just opening my technology.
Old technology. So we have a list. What's the list?
The first one was it's good for getting a resource together that you can take away. So a discussion is lost because it's not recorded, whereas this you can record it and come back to and refer to it. That was the second one, not losing the discussion and share it and go back to it. And third, it's engagement for some students. So they might be afraid to go face to face and share something, whereas online they're more comfortable to contribute and they've got more time to
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments? I'm kind of just, I'll probably keep using that article, but it just kind of, I want to get to the point of what they were trying to achieve. And so you've got the non-destructive editing, which is great, so you're keeping an archive. But what about alternatives? What are we using now? What's better? What would be so much more appropriate?
Could use Google Drive or like Google Docs.
Google Drive or Google Docs, absolutely.
That way they could, still be adding to and have an overall kind of.
Does anyone use Google Drive, Google Docs? For what sort of purposes?
I usually make summaries for my classes to work on whatever in the unit, so that by the end of the summary in the document, and also adding multiple choice questions that can go along with the users.
And can they edit it? Do they edit? Yes.
Yes, they started off being wild better than spamming.
about that, but eventually there's as far as I know at the moment. Haven't checked it lately, but.
Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you know, this whole notion of perhaps there's a problem with doing research in schools. That you know, I want to see what happens here. I think you know, the tool is the most important aspect in this article. It appears to be, rather than what the learning was meant to be, and the notion of actually getting students to co-create. And I think that the value of actually getting people to work on documents together and create documents or create products together is very, very valuable, but how we do it is actually more important. And knowledge communities, and next week the readings look at knowledge building networks and knowledge communities, and I think they attend to those in slightly different ways. Now that we've spent so much time getting connected, next week it's going to be much quicker, isn't it? Because everybody knows, we've practiced, and we'll try and make these microphones work properly. The idea, the fact that we've actually got people sitting around the room with us, I hope is kind of useful. What I always had in mind for this stuff. Here's some questions about social capital. I really like this article. I really like the notion of social capital and the notion of the two capitals that are in that paper, the bridging and the bonding. And the notion of bridging capital, which are the weak links, the little bits, the threads, the hellos, how are you going, the small bits of information that lead perhaps towards those that bonding capital that actually creates community. But, always a but. And I think that whenever you're reading any of these articles, it's really important to keep a critical eye, a critical thought on what's happening, what the author's saying. Just because we use them doesn't mean that we live by them. They're really valuable, and there's some great stuff, especially in the social capital way. But what, as some of the discussions have already raised, that notion of, well, we've got some computers, let's make a community. But I've got my questions that I really want you to look at now. There's a statement in that paper that says, I don't know what it would say, I've written it down here. Participation builds community. Now, that's really interesting to me because, as you will have no doubt guessed, I'm trying to build community through participation by giving you points, giving you marks for participation. But my question here really is how, and this is going on the Ning chat, how does participation you know what I mean? It's hard to talk about. Build community. And does it? Okay, that's a question. Another question for you is bridging capital really enough? And that's going to require some discussion of what bridging capital might actually be. I've also got people think the wrong one, sorry. How does this relate to today's practices and communities? Today's practices and communities. Okay, and what I'm asking at that point is, in the matrix that they present in this article, they talk about embeddedness and what they call autonomy, and they use that matrix a few times. And in one case, they say things like embeddedness At the micro level is through instant messaging and email. So really, if we're looking today, would we say that texting and Twitter are representing embeddedness and are approaching bridging towards bonding capital? Do modern applications do the same embedding, if it even was there? Okay, you understand me there?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Please continue your discussions, and I will rest. No. Good.
You said do something in Twitter. What did you mention?
I mentioned do texting, basically, SMS and Twitter and anything else that you can think of, Snapchat, Instagram, and then I want you to start listing or thinking about the contemporary equivalents and what they are actually providing. Because in technology terms, this article is ancient. What is it, 2004, okay? Didn't have iPhones, didn't have iPads, didn't have any smartphones, didn't have Facebook, didn't have, well, all those are Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. None of those things existed.
MySpace might have been there, I think, then.
I think MySpace was, because I heard a lovely quote. MySpace is so last century or something.
MySpace tried to come back, didn't it? Last year. Didn't MySpace try and make a revival last year?
Ted's disconnected.
I'm disconnected.
Okay, off you go.
What's the first question?
How does participation build community? Does it?
I think it depends on how you participate. In a way, like, I suppose if you, the quality of what you participate, maybe, like, it's one, particularly if you want to think of whether that community is a rich community of practice versus just a maybe not so rich community of practice. I suppose I'm thinking that way.
Seems like participation is kind of the bare minimum for community.
Yeah.
Like, I guess it was kind of like here just before when he was trying to get us to talk.
Yeah, we're here.
At that stage, you have absolutely no community.
Yeah.
Because no one's participating, but it still takes beyond just participating, saying things that are relevant.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think they say if you're going to have a sharing of knowledge or that building a repertoire of knowledge, then it does require quite an active participation. So maybe there's like inactive participation and maybe inactive participation. So it depends too how passionate you are about the topic or the thing that you're building as a community.
Yeah, like to actually achieve something. So like, build something.
Do you have a common goal?
Build knowledge or move towards a goal. Rather than just talk about the weather.
Why didn't that community work? What was the problem with that? I mean, that's what I felt about the reading, was that she talked about two kinds of social capital, and there was the strong kind, and then there was the weaker kind, which was bridging capital, bonding capital.
Yeah, bridging and the bonding. So the bonding was the stronger one, whereas the bridging is the sort of weaker. When like you might have relationships with numerous people, but then it's the weaker relationships. Kind of made me think of even when we were saying before about, I know you look at Facebook, say, and someone might have so many friends on Facebook, and you always think, well, how close are you with those people? What are those relationships really like? You just like to list that you have. Some people have over 1,000 friends on Facebook. You don't really know those people, or you're not really within a community necessarily with them. It's just you've met them once and then you've had each other on Facebook. It doesn't really mean you have you're not part of a community necessarily with them. guess you're on a community which is Facebook, I suppose. So one could say that Facebook's the community, but yeah, I guess it's probably just more, for a lot of people, I think it's more of a bridging, like numerous, but sort of weaker relationship versus a stronger bond that you might have. But I suppose Twitter maybe still is, I think, an example of that. Someone might follow lots of people on Twitter, but you don't necessarily, it depends to, as a person on Twitter, are you someone who actually tweets and actively engages in that process, or are you someone who just, you know, likes to follow and will just, which I think is fine as well. I think there's a place for both, whether you are that active participant within Twitter, or are you someone who will just follow and maybe retweet rather than actually being the active tweeter.
So that's this is an older article.
Yeah, so
they didn't have Twitter, but the notions that you're talking about sound to me like they're the kind of weaker version, the bridging capital version, which I reckon Nick's asking whether it's enough.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely enough. I actually think that, again, I'm just talking about my own experience, the stronger the connection, obviously that's something that you sort of establish outside of these communities, but the beauty of Twitter is you don't really know who these people are. They're connecting and following, or who you're communicating with is kind of random, and it's kind of nice not to actually worry too much. I'm not sure whether that was possible in that community.
Yeah, I think still with this community, they still were within a face-to-face community. So whether they're, and no matter of tapping into that, you can have the online, but you can also have the face-to-face, and they can work together. Maybe, and I think was because the language barrier and things was a bit of a problem, I think, when I remember reading the article. Yeah. So whether then maybe more work needed to be done to try and, if that was still a problem or that was considered an issue, then maybe that needed to be looked into further as what other options might have been possible to make those barriers not a problem if they were considered a problem.
So I'm hopeless about like remembering people's names or anything, but has everyone got like a Facebook page? Has everyone got one?
Yeah.
I think almost everyone in the world has got one. Like, it's weird.
I met someone the other day who didn't have one.
Yeah, there's a few people at my work who don't have them. Yeah.
It's when older people start getting them, you suddenly realise it's become kind of universal.
Mum's got two.
Yeah.
Dad gets one, you know.
Yeah.
It's my parents don't have one. But, yeah.
What do people do on Facebook? I'm not saying Facebook's perfect or anything like that. I'm just kind of interested. So, of the old generation, or even the people that you communicate with on Facebook. How do they communicate? What are they doing?
I think it depends. Everyone has it, and that's where some people maybe go into Facebook for different reasons. Like you'll have your people who will, constantly have status updates and check in everywhere, but then you'll have others who, but a lot of people just go, that's a bit of an overshare. So, but then others, I think the older generation maybe often will sign up because they've got someone who's going overseas and they want to sort of post put up photos or about their trip, or I think from my experience of maybe the older generation signing up might be maybe that reason why they will go into it, or to keep in contact because someone's overseas.
That's actually true, because before I came over for the studies, me and my wife, we actually set up an account for my mother-in-law, so that she could be updated with photos that we are uploading and what we are doing. Yeah.
So I reckon the ones that you're setting up for your mother-in-law, and for many of us, I'm not saying just me, but there is the strong capital, the bonding capital that happens in Facebook sometimes, but the kind of the offshoot of that for people doing kind of status updates and stuff that some of my friends send me. I look at them and I kind of wonder why they did it, but I think it's kind of nice that they feel so comfortable. It's not a big deal. They don't really care how many people read them or not read them. They're not really checking up, or they're just telling you stuff. And
sometimes people want to vent as well. A lot of time people, like I've got some friends who put in an update post because it's a kind of a vent sometimes. Maybe they've seen something or something's happened and they just want to get off their chest. So for them, that online outlet is something that they sort of, I don't know, for them it maybe it's a
Why does
stress
it work
release.
for older people? I mean, I'm not putting older people down, but why do older people like it? Why is it so good?
Follow their kids.
Follow the kids. I think you're right. Grandchildren.
Yeah. And if you look, a lot of people, it's because though you've got to accept someone's friend request, you'll get that issue too where maybe some people go, oh, well, say if it's their mum's on, they maybe, for some young people, well, I'm not going to accept their request because then they will see what I am up to. So they want to keep that online life a bit private maybe because they don't want their family members to maybe know that side of their life as well. I don't know, I think that's...
At school is...
Mocking ages, they can give you partial entrance.
Yeah.
At school level, like I'm talking high school here, I'm not sure. You're primary school, aren't you?
Yeah.
Is it primary school as well? Primary? Okay. And primary. So do people still have Facebook accounts in primary school?
No, because it'll be 13. You have to be 13. Yeah. So that Instagram, I know at school we had a huge discussion about it, particularly of Instagram, because Facebook bought out Instagram. And so Instagram, you didn't used to have to be 13 to use it, have an account, whereas now you have to be. I don't know, certainly as a teacher, that sort of terms and conditions of use of privacy has been a lot of discussion we've had with the students because a lot of them maybe aren't always aware of that, and that's something I think younger students have to be taught and exposed to because they shouldn't have them.
Are you in secondary?
Yeah.
So do kids have...
They don't. They're more into Instagram now.
Okay.
Like I teach year 9s and 8s and they don't have Facebook.
Interesting.
Yep.
Wow.
It's all about, I feel like, it's all about photos. They don't really have a voice anymore. They don't really care to express their opinion. Yeah, it's more just hashtag.
Yeah. Interesting. That change.
Well, I think it has changed.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's younger people, really young people, and really old people. But I think it's a fashion thing too.
Maybe, and especially if their parents are on it, they don't want to be on it.
They don't want to be on it. Yeah, that's true.
A fashion thing.
Well, it's awful, but that's what it feels like to me. That,
well, yeah, it's what's, I don't know, in at the time.
And that's why Snapchat's so popular. It's just photos.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Snapchat. That disappears. That
Yeah,
kind of,
so
that's
so
the
many
beauty of
seconds.
that. Your parents will never. You
But
send
people
the
can
message and it
screenshot.
goes away.
So that's the issue, because people can still take a screenshot of it.
Oh,
Which
do
is
they?
where
That notifies you.
it notifies if someone has, but didn't originally.
Yeah.
So I know that's why that Cronulla player who got fired, and that was through Snapchat.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
But it's
that
the
potential
nice
still.
easiness of both, Snapchat, but also Facebook, and I reckon even to a certain extent Twitter now. But I kind of wonder about Twitter because it's got there's a lot of traffic on Twitter.
There is,
and it seems to be there's a whole range of things that you can follow, watch, or if you just check in to what's trending. But if you start following, really
then
good
Facebook's taken
people,
that same. Facebook's now taken elements of Twitter and put it within Facebook. So Facebook's now got its own feed as well.
It's working. We've lost a few people, but the discussion now is really starting to work. I can hear it. Now I've just posted a little task in the chat session there to try and think about, to find contemporary applications that would provide the kinds of support that build social capital. So just think about what those applications might be, and possibly create a list, maybe even an electronic list that could be put up on the knee. So I'm taking the premise that social capital is a good thing. It's something that we aim for. It's certainly something that I aim for in this subject, and it's something that I've seen built in the past. So this notion of the two kinds of bridging in the building, but try and think, given that this was a specific project in a community or in a community setting, what would we use in our own professions, or what do you think we could use? What do you know? Any ideas? So there it is. There. We'll spend a few minutes on that, and then I might talk a little more about assessment and then we'll go home. So,
just respond in that thread there, or
yeah. So, you can respond there or post it in a blog or whatever. But have the discussion, and then maybe put a few things that we say. Well, we might be able to use this because that because, or I've used so and so. Because this will be useful. Then we'll have the archive hopefully. Good. Off you go. Back to noise.
I don't know, you need to look on the App Store, and social networking is a category, and within that there's certainly a lot of applications that come up just automatically, I suppose, which is interesting. And I suppose that's been added to constantly. So if you go to the App Store, one of the categories is actually social networking. So obviously heaps of stuff comes up there. And I don't know, when I even look at my iPad, I've got one of my groups is social, and then there's applications right there you have automatically. And I think I was only thinking before about what we were saying with how things are kind of fashionable at the time and what's in, whether it's sort of tweeting maybe is more popular now, Instagramming, maybe because too the development of the actual device over time has changed that as well. So I think maybe because we've had smartphones now more, or everyone's got an iPhone, therefore the type of application they may use in a social way has maybe changed. I don't know, I think maybe Instagram's become more popular because everyone's got a smartphone, so you can instantly just take a photo or that camera's always there. You've got a camera, you've got your video, and it's kind of constantly, it's that easy access maybe more now, I suppose, which maybe has changed the use of them over time, maybe, I don't know.
We're trying to think of new apps.
New apps or ones that are out there, I think even. I think you're saying, just alternatives to what they used in that article. But that article was so long ago.
Also think about what about all the translator apps that are available now?
Yeah.
They perhaps there wasn't really much in the article. I didn't think about trying to bridge that language barrier, because obviously that was a significant thing for them. And I know now, some of my friends on Facebook, they post in Chinese or in Spanish or the language. There's always a little thing that says translate.
Yeah.
So. I wonder if about using that in that kind of setting, allowing people to post in their native language and then you can translate it, and so that means you can actually talk to your neighbour when maybe you don't speak the same language as your neighbour.
I think that's a good idea, and I'm not saying, I think that probably was a problem, that those communities did have strong bonds, and they probably had better reasons to bond with their local language communities and maybe internationally even. Their bonds weren't local, although they knew each other. It was that weak kind of, that's called bridging bonds. So their social capital was apps. So that if they had apps that kind of contributed to the connecting to others, maybe like a translating app or some way of introducing people to each other somehow. I'm not sure whether there's
or parents who maybe English, isn't their main language, and their kids might be proficient in English, and maybe that could be.
That's a good idea.
And also for kids who are learning English as their second language, it might help them.
But like you said earlier about primary school kids, they don't really have those inhibitions about online and worrying about what they post or whether there's any problem about deleting someone else's message. They don't care. If you say delete it, great, let's delete it. So it's not as big a deal, which might be really quite helpful to form a little bit of a bond with the parents through the kids and that. Getting that sort of started. I'm not saying that's an app. That's actually quite a good idea, though.
Yeah, I have my Moodle at school, but I don't know what sort of these sort of things. That's a bit different from Moodle, is it?
Moodle?
Is that different from the ones you're talking about?
It's a little bit more structured, but there's no real difference. It uses the same kind of online technology, but I think it's...
Can you get those translator apps onto something like that?
Oh, you probably could.
Probably could. There'd probably be a tool within it. It depends on what
I know
different
that
versions kind of.
that some conferences, like international conferences, use Moodle, and I'm pretty sure I've seen like virtual kind of, conferences that might be done in Spanish, and I'm sure you can just, plug in Google Translate and you just get it all in English. So that is in Moodle, and that might not be a plugin, it may just be using Google Translate, but Moodle itself has got lots of access to plugins, like people have built things for it, so it probably does have an app that might automatically connect to Google Translate. That might have been what I was watching. I'm not sure what I was watching, but Moodle is a good product. It's just that it's a little bit more kind of structured. I don't know whether that makes sense to you guys, but I feel it's like harder to work with sometimes. It's got, the old-fashioned sort of rooms and then threaded discussions, and it doesn't seem to be as easy as, say, Facebook at all.
You could even like creating a Facebook page, so like kind of, you sign up for certain groups on Facebook, you can have your own page for that group. So a community like that really could actually have their own Facebook page, because you probably would find that still a number of those people within that community probably still have Facebook accounts if that community was, say, now, so many years later, than if you actually had a page for that community. Like I know LEI will have a Facebook page, or even other things. I'm trying to think on the side of my Facebook, I've got about 4 different groups that I'm associated with. And that way, you're always able to. You could that way have that translation capability within that.
Yeah.
It's just within that page. So, and lots of schools have Facebook pages. I know. That's why I actually know secondary classes have their Facebook page for their subject even, because they found that was one way to engage a lot of students who had Facebook accounts, and just being, obviously privacy and setting it up so it's quite locked is always a bit of a...
Has anyone used those more old-fashioned ones like Moodle? I'm not saying it's that old-fashioned, but like the old-fashioned online discussions. Do you remember those? Well, Moodle's basically got that, and might have chat as well as other virtual kind of spaces, which maybe a bit more like Facebook. But have you used Moodle?
We use it at school.
Okay.
I don't think we have any access to chatting.
Okay.
It's more we can add curriculum.
Yep. And then there's a discussion from that kids could have if you wanted them to.
Actually there is on that side of it, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I'm just thinking, the kids access to it, and parents.
Parents can go in there and check, yeah. I think parents kind of, it's the opposite now of what we were saying earlier about primary school kids introducing, but parents sometimes quite like to see what the kids are doing, and something like Moodle can give them that access that they wouldn't have before. Like if they get an account from the school to go in and have a look at what the kids are doing. Yeah.
I think a lot of schools, like I know my previous school, they had their school portal, and parents had their own login code for that as well, so they could view what was on each sort of year level page, and they could see exactly what's happening there. And the school I'm at now, they're in the process of getting a school box, and that has the same ability, so that way parents will have their own login. So.
Are you at secondary? Does secondary have that kind of ability for parents to log in?
Yeah, we've got a parent lounge that the parents can go through, and they can see things like what homework tasks have been set. It's a bit weird in that teachers don't have access to it at all. So I'm always getting parents calling up saying, how do I access Parent Lounge? I have no idea. I have never done it, I can't do it.
Yeah. Does anyone use FaceTime on an iPad, like for parents? Sometimes you can just get parents to come into a classroom and they can watch their kid do their own little presentation if they wanted to. You don't do that in primary school?
Skype, I've used Skype once.
Skype, okay. Skype's the same.
Skype, same, yeah, I've used Skype before, but...
Well, that might be a better one. I mean, Skype might be easier.
Skype's a bit easier, and I think there's a lot of actually, I don't know, this would have been, there's a lot out there kind of allowing teachers to be able to connect with different people through Skype. Like, through sort of Teach Me Melbourne's, they've had a lot of emphasis on using Skype, and so there's sort of a lot of groups out there to try and encourage that a little bit more.
Do you ever get parents to come in to class?
I haven't, no. Mine was connecting up with another class, so with another school, and using it that way to sort of build that sort of relationship. But Yeah, I think that's a really nice way of doing it, whether it's another school in Melbourne or even somewhere else. I did just try and connect with the school overseas, so time difference was definitely, you know, a bit of a hurdle, and a lot use it to connect with sort of experts in the field. So I saw something the other day of some school doing a sort of science project, and they've got a sort of science assistant or someone to present to the kids. But yeah, I think there's probably a lot of capabilities there as well, and opportunities, but the language barrier obviously is something that wouldn't be reduced.
But I reckon Skype is definitely an application that people are fairly comfortable with.
Yeah.
I know it's an old one, but it's sort of easy to understand, and you know, a lot of people use it to do international.
I use it like twice a week.
Twice a week,
just to parents.
Yeah.
Parents in law.
So if you're trying to set up a community, you know, even in that community setting, I reckon their problem was that they had, you know, computers with text-based kinds of interactions, which is fine, but, you know, just because of the language problem, even if you had something like visual, like Skype, you'd almost be able to get around some of those issues, like and gestures, and people could laugh at each other and try and sort it out. So, I mean, Skype is actually a good example, I reckon, and there would be reasons to using Skype when you actually think of a reason for including a Skype chat. I can think of school kind of reasons, but even in a community where you were trying to have a meeting.
Yep. What do you think of board meetings? I know I've got a friend who works for Royal Children's, and they then also have a campus out at the Hawthorn with another program, and they actually have their meetings, their daily meetings, conference calls.
Okay,
even.
there you go.
So it's that, because they can't all be at the one sort of place at the right time, that's how they communicate across campuses all the time. And it's, so I think maybe sometimes, maybe some businesses are doing it maybe a little bit more than others.
Well, I mean, you can even see us trying to do this here now. Like when you try and type at the same time as talk, it's really, really hard. So with Skype, you don't have to.
You don't have to worry about that at all.
It's hard, isn't it?
I reckon it's hard.
Talking and typing, I can think and type really fast.
Yeah.
But talking and typing, the same thing is really difficult.
So you've got a bit of a drawback when you've got to try and type, especially if you've got a community who's not used to typing.
Yeah. Like, yeah, lots of people. Well, I mean, school, anyone in a primary teacher? It's great, isn't it, when you're asking a prep or something, even a grade 3 kid to type.
Just to get the username in.
Yeah, QWERTY keyboard, uppercase.
And my son, when he was over in Canada, he goes for the Hawks. Finals. His sister-in-law put the game on there. He watched the game in Canada through Sky with them. And so he was like in the room with them, and they talked to him and talked to him, chatted. So.
It's like what we're trying to do here. I know we didn't achieve it, but with this, Rebecca, but you know, that you're trying to actually include a computer as a kind of interface with a person, and we're so much used to talking about things face to face. The closer you can get to that in the online environment, somehow it feels a bit more comfortable, even though it's weird, but it's better than typing. I mean, clearly that sort of typing thing is a bit of a drawback for young kids, people with the language issue, and no typing skills is hopeless.
I think when you look at, even if you're at a PD, a lot of people will, because Google Hangouts have become very popular in that way too. You could be somewhere and one teacher at Melbourne's even recently, they actually had someone do their presentation via the Google Hangout. Like it's that you don't have to be present anymore at a PD. You can actually, that's why I love like through Twitter as well, you can actually just follow conference overseas and learn a lot without actually being there.
Yeah.
And studying, I guess, at home when you've got that visual thing, it's not isolated, it's just reading.
I'm amazed at how many Twitter people, like just Twitter updates that you get from conferences now. So you can just sit at your computer and you can follow the whole conference because some people are actually really good at summarising, typing what someone's saying.
In a nutshell. Because it's only got 140 characters, so you've got to, but that's that key idea that they're getting across can be
I love it.
Amazing.
I mean,
and then too, it's that sharing of ideas as well. Like people put up their slides for a presentation, or they'll put up notes they've made. So
Yeah.
I think that barrier of people wanting to openly share things is kind of broken down as well over time, which is.
I know it's not ready
good.
yet, but I think there's going to be something in Google Plus for classrooms. It's called Google
Yes,
Classroom.
yeah, I heard
Yeah.
heard that about that the other
Well,
on
the
Twitter.
beta
I saw it.
version's available, and you can probably download it. But I don't even know whether you need to download it. You just have to be part of the beta group.
Yeah.
And you can try it out. But,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're just getting teachers to try it out around the world and see what people suggest they need to
But I think
have.
that's in Google for Education has kind of they've done such a push in the last even just the last year. They're kind of really
How are we going?
and they're again ambassadors out there and people who've become Google educators and
Now,
it's kind of
thank you. There's been lots of very interesting discussion. Then I would like you please, those people, you'll see that June has put somewhere, has put about her son uses Skype in the corner of the PC whilst he's gaming. He might have up to 3 or 4 kids at the same time.
Wow.
So there's a contemporary application that's a little community. We could investigate that community and find that those 3 or 4 kids are actually part of a much bigger circle. And they could be, there could be this whole linking of communities all playing the same game, as well as the chat that's going on. One of the discussions that we're doing about the game is possibly helping them beat other people that they're playing. It's kind of it's a great thing. My wife plays bridge online and wants me to learn so we can sit and look at each other and win all the games. But I'm too slow. I can't learn it. So, thank you. Thanks, June. That's really good. I'm pleased you can hear us. So, can you please post somebody in, just one from each group, a couple of those ideas into that discussion line we'll post. So we should have this discussion in the chat. We can archive the chat, can't we?
The chat, yeah, we can archive that. Yep.
So we'll do that and we'll talk at the same time. So who would like to add something to the discussion by talking? Well, I'm going to have to work hard on this group. Who would like to, somebody's posting, but who's going to add something by talking as well? Okay, so somebody's posting and somebody's adding.
We just talked about using Twitter into blog, like along with and then we also talked about validating students' work through communication as work in the classroom. So they would